Welcome to Pop Monster, a podcast to feed all your pop culture cravings. My name is Sarah, a self-confessed superfan, and right now we're heading all the way back to where the Housewives phenomenon began, with a complete Real Housewives of Orange County rewatch. So grab an orange and let's get into it. I just can't believe how excited I am to undertake this mammoth rewatch of Real Housewives of Orange County. It was so hard for me to decide what I wanted to cover on the podcast once the latest series of Love Island UK ended. But in my heart, the Real Housewives cinematic universe is what I consider to be my reality TV home. I have watched every episode of every US Real Housewives franchise, including DC and Dallas. I still need to acquaint myself with the UK and Australian cities. I hear that I'm really missing out. But once I knew I wanted to do a Real Housewives rewatch, I found it so difficult to choose between Atlanta, Beverly Hills, and Salt Lake City. And then I saw that we were celebrating 20 years of Orange County, our very first city, and knew that it was kismet. It has been over 15 years since I first saw season 1, and I can remember where I was when I first encountered the show. I was 20 years old and popped into one of my friends' houses, and a season 7 episode was on in which a demon named Slade Smiley decided to start doing stand-up. Without any context, I was hooked and was paralyzed in shock watching his performance, thinking to myself, why is this man doing this? A question I still think every time I look at anything that he, or Gretchen for that matter, are doing. Anyway, my plan for each episode is to cover 4 episodes of Orange County. Now, I'll warn you, with the first couple of seasons, if you've never watched them before, you kind of need to plow through them to get to the good stuff. They're a bit slow, but they're pretty short seasons, so I really don't recommend skipping them. They're such a relic of a pastime, and it's so interesting to see how the Housewives franchise has developed over the years. Of course, it's still very unrelatable for pretty much everyone watching, but it does feel a lot less polished and in some ways more earnest than the current day product. And from the very start, we have our OG of the OC. Love her or hate her, she's a pillar of this franchise. Outside of Kimberly, all of these women still have some relevance in future seasons, so it's useful to see their starts on this show. Alright, let's set the scene for season 1. It's 2006, and in popular culture, we were in my opinion, the golden age of television. At least for TV shows where the main focus wasn't on a male protagonist. 2 of the biggest shows on television were the incredibly bingeable Desperate Housewives and the OC. Now, I wouldn't describe the show as wish fulfillment. I personally find it can be very dark at times, but there's something so fascinating about observing the lives of the wealthy inhabitants living behind the gates of an exclusive community. And today, let's get things started with the first 4 episodes, which is half of the first season. We begin with the very first episode entitled Meet the Wives, and straight off the bat, we're immersed headfirst into the gated community of Coto de Casa. They tell us the average house price is between $1.8 and $2.2 million. Naturally, I couldn't help myself and had a look at the houses available in Coto de Casa today. And honestly, I had a ball just mindlessly scrolling and spying on everyone's horrible interior design choices. And the average house price there today is around $1.9 million. So I don't know whether they were exaggerating about the 2006 prices, but either way, these people are absolutely not ready for the financial crisis that's about to hit them in 2007. They're really displaying their wealth and serving pure lifestyle porn. It honestly reminds me of MTV Cribs with the 10-car garages full of Rolls Royces. Watching this when I was 20, I fear I genuinely found it aspirational. I had a very warped perception of Orange County thanks to the OC and the incredibly liberal Cohen family, when in reality it seems to be much closer to a conservative MAGA hellscape. Although to be fair, when I think about all of the noopsies that Kirsten Cohen despised, they're actually a pretty accurate preview of the kind of women featured on this show. Next, we get something that has since become one of the defining trademarks of the Real Housewives franchise, the opening credits. Now, every year we all look forward to hearing the new taglines, but I genuinely think for season 20 of Orange County, They missed a trick by not leaning fully into the nostalgia and bringing back these completely nonsensical season 1 soundbites. With the iconic circus-esque theme tune playing underneath, there's something that's simultaneously high camp and slightly haunting about hearing Vicki scream, "I don't want to get old." Actually, I need to run through all of these because I get such a thrill hearing these lines pulled straight from the show, rather than the polished, scripted taglines we get now. Every single one is completely unhinged out of context, but somehow perfectly encapsulates each woman. Joe's is, "He's pretty much keeping me." Laurie's is, "Are the police involved?" Oh, Jesus. Gina absolutely lucked out by getting the only vaguely normal one. Maybe in season 1, she's supposed to be our grounded, relatable Midwestern mum. Hers is, "It's just money, you can't take it with you." And poor Kimberly, in her one and only season, will forever be remembered for saying 85% of the women around here have had breast implants. Now that we've been welcomed into Kodo and introduced to the show's wonderfully bizarre opening credits, it's time to meet our 5 housewives. There's just something incredibly relaxing about the pace of season 1. Having just 5 housewives keeps everything very simple, and you actually get the time to know them pretty well. First up, we have Gina Keogh, who's working as a real estate agent. Now, I am obsessed with the house she's trying to sell in this episode. It's a $10 million Tuscan mansion, and honestly, I have incredibly tacky taste because it looks like a cheesecake factory, and I would move in there in an instant. I've talked about this before, but I follow loads of TikTok and Instagram accounts run by women who, like me and many of us, seem to be having low-level nervous breakdowns and have decided to cope by pretending they live in 2005. They're watching Desperate Housewives on little kitchen, TV, DVD combo players and decorating their homes in that warm Tuscan style that absolutely dominated the early 2000s. And I have to say, I think we all need to bring it back. I love the warmth of it. I've had enough of these cold, clinical, all-white mansions that have taken over reality TV. I blame the Kardashians for that, and one of the worst offenders has to be Angie K's house on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Before her career in real estate, Gina actually had an incredibly successful career in the 80s as both an actress and a Playboy playmate. Now, as I'm rewatching the show, I'm really trying to experience these women as if I don't already know everything that's coming. I really don't want to be tainted by what I know about who they become and where they end up today, so I won't spend too much time talking about season 20, which is currently airing. But I do love how things have come full circle with another former Playboy playmate joining the cast. The legacy of Gina Keogh lives on. She looks absolutely stunning in all of these old photos, and we're also introduced to her demonic, mustachioed husband, former MLB player Keogh. He passed away a few years ago, and I don't really want to speak ill of the dead, although I have to say that I've never really believed the saying money can't buy happiness. It absolutely can. But this marriage is probably the closest thing to convincing me otherwise. I genuinely cannot imagine a more depressing existence than sharing my life with this. We've seen and heard some incredibly dark things across the Real Housewives cinematic universe. But one story that has always stayed with me is Gina explaining how Matt and his mother essentially picked her because she had the right build for their genetics. This is The Handmaid's Tale. I'm honestly disappointed we never got to meet Matt's mum, because in my head, she's basically a muzzy Dean Dale-style matriarch running the whole operation. Anyway, they've certainly put that good bill to use because they have 3 children, Shane, who's 18, Cara, who's 16, Colton, who's 13. Poor Colton, he is really the forgotten child. I'd also completely erased him from my memory. I did look him up on Instagram though, and he seems to be living a lovely life with his dog, so good for him. Now, Shane, it feels incredibly weird saying this as a 34-year-old, but when I first watched the show, I genuinely thought he was the hottest guy on the planet. And you just know those pervs at Bravo agreed, because there are an absurd number of scenes of this teenage boy wandering around shirtless while carrying a baseball bat. They were absolutely trying to lean into the Desperate Housewives fantasy. Shane was basically Orange County's answer to John the Gardener. Now, when we first meet Cara, she is whining about having to drive a hand-me-down 2-year-old Mercedes. God give me strength. Gina feels like the best way to resolve this is to take her to a car dealership and purchase her a new BMW. I have no words, but this makes me nervous knowing what I know from watching The Big Short. Very soon, people aren't going to be buying houses from you, Gina. I get too anxious watching people not being responsible with their finances. Gina is probably in a better position than a lot of people we've seen on these shows. Even today, and I was so saddened to hear about Gina's recent tongue cancer diagnosis. But seeing her set up a GoFundMe for her medical expenses definitely left a sour taste in my mouth. Especially due to her politics and her voting for cuts on healthcare and cancer research. The US healthcare system is fucked, but Gina and her family are loaded, and there are a lot more worthy GoFundMes that people could be donating to. That's all I'll say. So with Shane, he's an absolute asshole, a stereotypical jock in every scene where he's featured. Although I get that he's only 18 and is definitely modelling his father's horrible treatment of his mum. But it's tough to watch. The fact that Shane and his dad moved into a separate home from the rest of the family, just so that Shane could attend a different school with a superior baseball program. This is taking me back to when I watched One Tree Hill and the dad being so overbearing so that his son Nathan will fulfill his basketball dreams. Ugh, that level of pressure would make anyone go psycho. In the pilot episode, we get to see the results of the Major League Draft, and I have to plead ignorance on all of this. All of my sports knowledge is about basketball, and the only thing I know about baseball is the Derek Jeter herpes tree. Ultimately, he gets selected as the 1091st overall pick in the 36th round by the Oakland A's. So even to me, it's quite obvious that he is not the baseball equivalent of LeBron James. Things aren't looking good for Shane, and he is not even bothering to attend his graduation. And I was so shocked, not by his decision to skip it, or even by his parents not even trying to attend, but by the fact that this boy even graduated. God bless him. Next we meet Joe De La Rosa, who still holds the record as the youngest ever main cast member in the Real Housewives franchise. In season 1, she is just 24. We are also introduced to her succubus of a boyfriend who is responsible for her being part of this community, the 36-year-old sleazeball Slade Smiley. And it genuinely pains me to even acknowledge that he was almost classically handsome back in the day, even in his cheesy modelling pictures. Ugh, that was tough to spit out. Something that I think helps all of these earlier Real Housewives seasons seem more authentic is the family focus. With hindsight, it was irrefutably a horrible idea to put these children on reality television, and many of the kids of Orange County have sadly been the casualty of their parents' decision. This is all very dark, and where it is possible, I would really like to focus on the adults on the show and not spend too much attention on the children. When we meet Joe and Slade, we're also introduced to his two young sons, Grayson and Gavin, and sadly a few years ago, Grayson passed away due to his long battle with cancer. The only thing I'll say on this is that it's clear that the boys' mothers have really dedicated their lives to raising their sons, and Slade is a deadbeat who can go fuck themselves. He's scum, and spoiler, but every week on the podcast, I will be giving out some awards, including recognising the biggest red flag husband, and that will be a tough race. No matter what you think about these women, 98% of the house husbands are even more horrible, and the ladies deserve better. It's tough to watch how he is trying to prevent Jo from working and trying to trap her as a stay-at-home housewife. She's so young, and this guy is using his money to control her, and it's even more ironic when we consider where he is today and his current position as a professional bag holder for Gretchen. I just feel so sorry for Jo, but I have to flag how utterly disgusted I am by her sitting on the kitchen counter with her shoes on like she's a cat. Nobody is actually cooking in this house, but it was unhygienic as hell. Now, for anyone who is unaware, the reason Jo and Slade are on the show is due to Slade buying her spot at a charity auction. But it's obvious to everyone that he wishes he was the Real Housewife, and he's cast himself as the poor, devoted dad who is suffering while Jo is going out clubbing with her friends. Ugh, spare me, Slade. Stop trying to cage this woman, and if you wanted someone more mature, then maybe you could have tried dating someone your own age. Leave her alone, you creep, and let her go out and party with the girls. Watching her perform a sexy dance for him wearing a pink feather boa and Dipsy's hat from the Teletubbies was horrific. That's no life for a 24-year-old. The next wife that we're introduced to is our one-season wonder Kimberly. She's married to her husband Scott, and they have 2 children. Now, the nicest thing I can say about this man is that he's kind of a no-name with a nothing face. If you met him, he would just run through you like water, and I'm sorry, but he's instantly forgettable, which, to be fair, is one of the lowest crimes for any of the husbands on these shows. And they're still together, and I'm not sure if that would still be the case if she'd remained on reality television. Kimberly's whole shtick is her being incredibly image-focused, And from the scene with her getting stretched out by her Pilates instructor, they're definitely having an affair. Kimberly is also a victim of early 2000s boob job technology. She had this operation at her husband's insistence, and medicine just wasn't the same then as it is today. She has these huge bolt-ons that are the fake titty equivalent of a floppy disk. While she's having drinks with her friends, she gets interrupted by Joe, who is very lonely and wants to try and integrate into this new community. This was definitely heavily scripted by production, but it was jarring seeing Jo dressed in her boho chic skirt, sitting at a table with all of these identical blonde women wearing their sky tops. It really felt like she was being indoctrinated by the Stepford Wives, and in this first series, we don't really get any interactions between these women, so this was a bit of a sneak peek at the next evolution of this franchise. Alright, the time has arrived for us to meet the OG of the OC, Vicki Gunvalson. Love her or hate her, she was born to be on television, and that is immediately clear as soon as we watch her first scene, selling insurance in her home office and telling us how hard she works in her testimonial. We meet her husband Don, her son Michael, and her daughter Brianna, who is celebrating prom in this episode. Now, I think Vicki is a MAGA psycho and an absolutely deplorable human, but that describes basically every woman in this franchise. And I have to say that I really respect her drive and how she supported her family with her career. I cracked up when we first met Don in his talking head that is given while he's washing his car. In more modern seasons, I love to see the more polished testimonials where we can see the different outfits from the Housewives, but there's something so comforting in seeing the season 1 low budget on the fly production. Now, if there's one house husband that I could never present with a Red Flag Husband Award, it would have to be Don Gunvalson. I have such a soft spot for this. You can't help but love him. He just seems like a good time guy, and it speaks volume that he still maintains a relationship with Vicki's children. Now, a lot of people dismiss the Real Housewives shows as trash, but just witnessing the mother-daughter dynamic between Vicki and Brianna is Anthropology 101. The level of control that Vicki needs to exercise on Brianna's life, and her lectures on not losing her virginity at prom, how to get her hair styled, and even on Brianna's dates tux. Instantly transporting me to that horrific TLC show, Smothered. Oof, Vicki really runs a tight ship. I do think she really loves her children, but she's a narcissist who loves herself even more. The fact that she's trying to make the end of Brianna's high school experience all about her, this triggers me on a personal level as someone whose mum makes all of my birthdays about her and how she should really be the focus. Also, sidebar, but I need to get an update on Brianna's high school boyfriend and prom date Colby. I know basically nothing about him, and I promise I'll stop jumping ahead, but even with the little knowledge I have on Colby, I can guarantee that Brianna would be living a happier and healthier life than with the raging psycho she's currently married to. Now, Brianna's graduation day is a real stark contrast to Shane Keough's. Vicki has flown in all of their relatives from Chicago, including her brother Billy, and we even get an appearance from her ex-husband and the father of her children, Mike Sr. And wow, it is very difficult to imagine Vicki ever being with this man. He's just not meshing with her Orange County persona. And I would pay good money to see what she was like in her younger Chicago days working at a grocery store. That's the young Sheldon-style spin-off that I need. The final season 1 housewife is Lori, and she looks like catnip for an old, horny rich man, but every time I see her on screen, I just get this overwhelming sense of sadness, and not just because she's a poor one. There's just this darkness and cloud of depression that weighs over all of her scenes. When we first meet her, she's working for Vicki in her home office and selling insurance. She used to be rich, but got royally screwed in her divorce, so is now trying her best to survive and claw her way back into her old, wealthy community. Currently, she's living in a townhouse with her 2 youngest children, Joshua and Sophia, while her eldest daughter, Ashley, is living in LA. Okay, going into this rewatch, I really didn't factor in how heavy this show was, and wasn't prepared to watch so many of the cast members who have now sadly passed away. Now, Laurie's son, Josh, definitely has some troubled teenage years. Then later, a long public battle with addiction and a lot of legal issues. He passed away a couple of years ago, and he's someone that I don't want to cover too heavily on the podcast apart from when absolutely necessary. I will say that the children from the Real Housewives of Orange County have definitely faced the most negative consequences for appearing on this show. And while I'm happy for them to talk about their husbands, having seen what's happened to some of the kids, I'm much happier that the show has now shifted to featuring them in a more reduced role. But I have to confess that I do love Laurie's daughter Ashley. She comes home to visit the family in this episode, and I think she has some star potential. She could have really thrived if Bravo had some Vanderpump Rules style show back then. However, her plan is to move back home, which I'm sure is definitely motivated by the reality show that is filming. And hey, like Vicki, I do love to see a woman with ambition, but Laurie considers her to be an additional burden, and to be fair, that woman is hanging on by a thread. At least she can let her hair down with some cocktails and a night out at the club with her friend Lorelai, not Gilmore. I get such a strong wave of nostalgia when I see all the bars and the restaurants these ladies go to. Transport me there immediately. And one of my favourite recurring features of the Real Housewives cinematic universe is getting to hear everyone's food and drink orders. Because I'll confess that I'm a total dork who will Google these places, look at the menu, and decide what I'd order. I'm just a little fat kid. Now, people love to complain about how hard the dating scene is in 2026. And I agree that it seems like a hellscape, but everyone needs to take a glimpse at the male prospects available at the Temptation Lounge in Newport Beach. Laurie and her friend are basically working in the salt mines. The amount of sweaty, chinless sleazes they're having to wade through. It was bone-chilling. Alright, let's move on to episode 2, and one of the main storylines in this episode is something we would never see today. They're delving deep into the ecosystem of Coto de Casa. There is an infestation of rabbits, and they're messing up everyone's gardens. In previous years, they were overrun with coyotes, but due to them hunting them down, there are less predators for the bunnies, and it's now their time to shine. So I was immediately alarmed by their solution, which was to arm Shane Keogh, a boy who I'm concerned has taken too many fastballs to the head and has a lot of pent-up rage. Him and his Australian friend Connor are going fully Rambo and going door to door to provide an exterminator service to all of our housewives. I swear to all that is holy, it was a lot to watch these teens on a bunny killing spree for a solid 15 minutes of this episode. And I say this as a hypocrite who occasionally likes to feast like a hobbit and has enjoyed several rabbit stews in my time. Luckily, they're both absolutely useless, so no rabbits were actually harmed during the filming of this episode. Okay, I need to talk about Joe and Slade. And at the end of this episode, I will be giving out an award for the most stylish moment in these episodes. And it's pretty safe to say that it won't be going to Slade for his Ken-style fluorescent cycling outfit with ridiculously tight shorts. He's up there with Simon Van Kempen's Red Leather Ensemble in the Eye Bleach Hall of Fame. There's just something so unfuckable about this dork. The fact that at least 3 housewives have hooked up with him is a testament to how horrifying the dating pool is for women over 40. I was dying laughing at this first trap compilation they put together of Slade cycling and working out with an eye mask on. This goof is lucky that he's focusing all of his energy right now on a 24-year-old who is not old enough to know better. This episode we're treated to witnessing him in action at a big business meeting. Now, both him and the CEO that he's trying to smooze are wearing these crazy, oversized suits. I'm no expert in men's fashion, but they look like they're attending the 2003 NBA draft. This meeting is a rough watch, throughout which Slade seems incompetent and the CEO guy looks like Ed Norton after an allergic reaction. But he's also making sure that Slade knows that he's the big dick on campus. He just keeps chugging Red Bulls and picking up phone calls while Slade is trying to pitch to him. Now for Jo, she's still sitting on the kitchen counters like she's Uncle Jesse from Full House and trying to develop her friendship with Kimberly. They hook up to play tennis, and if I was a rich lady with nothing better to do with my time, then I think this would be my sport. Mainly due to the adorable outfits, or actually maybe pickleball because, like Jo, I don't like to run. First they go shopping to make sure Jo's clothes match the children's tennis racket that Slade bought her. Now, with Jo and Kimberly, there is no real friendship forming here. There is such a lack of chemistry and connection. They're at very different stages in their lives, although Google tells me that Kimberly was just 39 in season 1. That took me slightly aback, but it's still not as jarring as learning that Kim Zolciak was just 29 in her first season of Atlanta. Now, at the Keogh residence, we have a visit from Uncle Richie, a close family friend who is no relation, and the way in which Cara lights up when he shows up made me sad. As their father is both physically and emotionally absent, it seems like this man is their surrogate paternal figure. Although my main highlight from their scene was seeing that Kara's new car has cup holders that cool your drink for you. This technology has still not reached me. If I was rich, having a car like this would be my second priority behind having a Coke freestyle machine in my house. I love my sodies. Although I don't really find Uncle Richie to be the most heartwarming. He's definitely the handsy uncle, especially with Kara. I wasn't loving his interactions with her. Anyway, he's joining them in Mexico and plans to take Shane out so that they can pick up women together. This is a family vacation, sir. It seems like this perv is using Shane as bait to attract some younger ladies and then he can pick up the leftovers. But Shane seems more interested in torturing poor Colton and racing cars with him. I'm once again relieved to know that he is doing okay in 2026 because I got really upset listening to him share that he developed a stutter due to speaking so fast because Shane always cuts him off. This broke my heart, and then I had to witness Uncle Richie grinding with some young girls at the club with Shane. Yeah, I'm going to need to see less of this man. Okay, let's move on to something slightly less disturbing. In this episode, Vicki is going on a Mexican cruise with Brianna, a couple of her friends, and their mothers. Now, sidebar, but when covering the first couple of seasons, with each episode, it makes sense to just go through things housewife by housewife, as there's currently such little overlap between them, and everything is very siloed. Anyway, it's nice to see that whipping it up has always been an integral part of Vicki's personality, and we got some more footage of her terrorizing the Mexican locals. She has to be on some kind of most wanted list in that country. Just watching her scream and threaten the men operating the banana boat that Brianna and her friends are going on. My thoughts and prayers are with those men. You just know that Vicki isn't tipping any of them. Meanwhile, Mike and Dawn are left home alone, and this just seems like a scene pulled straight from 2.5 Men. When they're left to their own devices, the house is silent, and they're just surviving on cereal. We do get to see a lot more of Mike in this episode, and he will always remain one of my favourite Housewives kids. He is the antithesis of Vicki, and was critical to the development of the Real Housewives cinematic universe. So thank you for your service, Mike. But at this stage in his life, he's 19, flunking out of college, and is really lucky that he has the parachute of working in insurance with his mom. At least he has her there to lecture him on getting a job while she boils a frying pan full of hot dogs. I would also like to say thank you to the editors for giving us that close-up of Vicki's cooking, and I would definitely watch a YouTube short series of Vicki in the kitchen. While Vicki is away, Laurie is holding down the fort at the office alongside her daughter Ashley. God bless Vicki for providing jobs and financial freedom for all of the at-risk hot blondes in Orange County. Their workday is interrupted by a call from Josh's principal, and there's been an incident involving him, the police, and drugs at the school. I have to say that this show does a really good job of making you really feel sorry for Laurie. They play some sad music while she talks about just how far she's fallen. It was really working on me. I was feeling so terrible that she now has to do her own laundry and household chores before I realized that this is my life. Knowing what we know now, it's tough to watch Laurie try to cover for Josh and make excuses for him having drugs at school. I can't imagine how difficult this was for her, and it does sound like she really did try to get him help, but he needed to be held more accountable for his actions. Although that seems to be a common theme in Orange County, and a lot of problems just get swept under the rug. Josh has now been placed in juvenile hall. We watch as Laurie goes to visit him. Now, it does seem like she is struggling financially, but I have to question how much she was getting paid for the season, because it really doesn't seem worth it to put cameras on her children during this time. We also see that Laurie's coping mechanism and plan of action is to find another rich husband, so her and Lorelai are once again trolling the local bars and clubs, but it's slim pickings. A stark contrast to this is Kimberly, who leads a pretty boring life, and her main storyline this episode is buying a new car. Apologies to you, Kimberly, because you seem like a very nice lady, but it's taking all my strength not to fast forward through your scenes talking about the fuel efficiency of different car models. I did appreciate seeing her get into the boot so she could see if their dog would fit. This brought back some core memories I have of one of my friends whose parents did kidnapping drills with him. I also love that she had zero qualms about calling the car salesman slimy in her testimonial. I wish they would have put his name on screen, because this guy was wild. Now, he seemed like he'd be an absolute riot to share some lava shrimp with at a margarita fill, but at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if he is somehow in the Epstein files. And I think that is an amazing point to transition us to episode 3. Upgrading has nothing to do with you, honey. One of our main storylines in this episode is Vicki and Laurie getting ready for an insurance conference in New Orleans. Watching this awakened a fresh wave of jealousy for me because I used to work in a job where I'd occasionally fly out for conferences. One year, I ended up going to Baltimore during a blizzard, and one of my coworkers got to go to New Orleans and dined in a haunted restaurant. I will forever remain bitter about this, and dear God, what I would give to try some authentic gumbo and beignets. Anyway, Vicki is incredibly upfront on how envious she is of Laurie's appearance, so in preparation for this business trip, it's time for her to try Botox. Oh, this is like watching baby Hitler be born. The first Botox session is a domino that triggers Vicki to go through about 20 different faces over the next 20 years, and starts her addiction to plastic surgery. This is hard to watch, and I still miss Vicki's original face. From the mouths of babes, Michael asks her, why don't you just get old like everyone else in the world? Oh, my sweet summer child, if only it was that easy for women over 40, especially those who live in the OC bubble. Once we're in New Orleans, we also get to meet Vicki's sister Lisa, who also works in insurance, and we can see some family resemblance. Now, Laurie is still a hot mess. Her luggage didn't make it onto the plane because Laurie only made it to the airport 20 minutes before her flight time. Oh, this broke me out in hives. This could never be me. One of my favorite places on earth is any airport, and I hate running late for anything. So I'm always there like 5 hours before any flight, so I have sufficient time to people watch, shop duty-free, and eat at Wagamama's. In addition to having no luggage, Laurie can't afford to stay in the same hotel as Vicki and her sister, so she's instead staying at the local hotel-motel Holiday Inn. I honestly can't believe that Laurie is expected to cover the cost for the hotel. This seems fucked up, and Vicki should have got her a room at the hotel she was staying in. This is a work trip, and Vicki is her employer and taking a cut of her commission. I really feel like Vicki did this to keep Laurie in her place. She's clearly resentful of women that are considered to be more conventionally attractive. And while she wants Laurie to succeed, I think she also enjoys having that power over her. While Laurie is away, her daughter Ashley is planning to have a party at her house, which goes completely against Laurie's ground rules. But she didn't need to worry too much because this party was lame. And watching Ashley talk on the phone with Josh while he's in juvenile hall was one of the most somber scenes I've ever seen. Now, I consider this show to be a comfort watch, but I do warn you that it is definitely very heavy and dark at times. So that is something to be mindful of if you're not in the best place mentally. Now, when we first see Joe and Slade in this episode, they're once again playing that sexy background music. I'm holding these two responsible for all of the softcore porno scenes that will be included in many seasons of Real Housewives to come. These two are Lewis and Clark, and without them we would never have seen Eddie and Tamara in the bathtub, or Whitney and Justin body painting in Salt Lake City. Now, well, Slade is all horny about the thought of Joe in a tennis skirt, but he thinks her getting a part-time job is a boner killer. Ugh, I hate him. We also get to see him use his sons as props, and he brings them to the equestrian center so that he can ambush CEO Brent again and seal that business deal. He manages to arrange drinks that evening where Joe can also buddy up with his wife Cindy. This whole scene is a painful reminder for me of how I could never be a trophy wife. I really lack the social skills, and in this scenario, I would kill any of my partner's career prospects by spending that evening talking about all of the unresolved mysteries and plot holes in the hit TV show Lost. Now, looking at the tasteless wealth on display in Brent and Cindy's tacky McMansion, I have to wonder why Cindy and her bedazzled cell phone were never in contention to become a housewife. This family is clearly not a first to the cameras, although they're also clearly not billionaires like Slade is suggesting. It just seems like they're not desperately living beyond their means like he is. Now, I wanted to fully throttle Slade when he was talking down to Joe in front of these people. He's such a condescending prick who says that she has Joe-isms, strokes her head, and tells them that it's not her fault because she comes from Peru. Yeah, fuck this guy. This couple clearly don't respect him, and I think Joe did a much better job of charming them at this party, and later with Cindy when they ride horses while drinking cocktails. In this episode, we get to see another clash between Joe and Slade when she goes out to party with her friends on a yacht, while Slade is filming another one of his staged good dad scenes with the kids. Things only get worse for them when she tells him that she's got a new job as a mortgage consultant because she wants to get some independence and her sense of identity back. But Slade doesn't want that, and his dream is to have her be a pretty thing in a cage. Over to Kimberly, and she really has things under control. In her household, they're very health conscious and try to limit their sugar intake. She also shares with us a bit about her history with skin cancer. However, her no-name husband has hidden a plate of donuts in a cabinet. Ugh. I got so bored during all of these domestic hijinks scenes, but at least she is going on a girls' trip to Palm Beach. And it's time for her to let loose and whoop it up. Kimberly and her brigade of blonde friends are Lady in the Tramping their food of Benihana, catching shrimp tails in their fake titties, and, this made me feel a lot better about the lack of girl trips I've had as an adult. Later in the club, Kimberly is channeling her inner Camille Grammer and grinding with many men on the dance floor. I'm definitely a lot more interested in these scenes of her losing her belly button ring than any of the ones we've had so far with her normal family. Alright, let's move on to Gina. And due to his low draft placement, Shane has decided not to sign with the Oakland A's and will instead be visiting junior colleges that he can play at. So they'll be doing some college visits in Arizona, and he wants Gina to join him because he can't handle 5 hours alone in a car with his father who never speaks. Now, I'm not usually someone who advocates for adultery, but I really hope that Gina was getting some on the side, because this has got to be one of the most miserable marriages I've ever seen. We also learn a bit more about Matt's shift in personality. His MLB career was cut short in 1992 when he took a foul ball to the head and suffered a really serious brain injury. I don't know why this family keeps making me cry, but I did get emotional hearing about how their dad was so happy-go-lucky and a completely different person before the accident. So I have to give Gina a lot of credit for holding this family together. Oh, I need to move past this. Shane runs some drills at one of the colleges, and my main takeaway was him almost throwing up while doing a 60-yard sprint because he'd recently eaten a mushroom sandwich. My mission before I record the next OC Rewatch podcast is to either track one of these down or at least try to make one myself. Anyway, the final episode I'll be covering today is episode 4, Talk Talk Talk. We open with Jo, who has never been happier after starting her dream job, which has triggered Slade to hire a young personal assistant Megan to, in his words, pick up her slack. This girl looks about 15 years old, and I really need her to do a Reddit AMA and spill the dirt she has on Slade from this time period. Her having to listen to Slade and his gross friend make innuendos about stroking her and wanting her to grab their balls. I truly hope that the way that he treated her and Jo haunts Slade now that he has become Gretchen's personal assistant / house husband. Now, someone who is working hard in this episode is Gina Keogh. She's taking Kimberly and Scott house hunting because things are feeling pretty cramped in their $1.5 million home, so it's time to upsize. Honestly, this whole thing seems staged, but I won't complain because I love looking at some tacky 2000s house porn. Gina also invites him to a barbecue at her house later that day, and praise be, we're finally going to get some more interactions between the cast members. In this episode, we do also get a separate storyline with Kimberly and Scott hosting a birthday party for their kid, but this was so aggressively normal that I have no notes on this. They generally seem like a very nice family, and their daughter is a sweetheart. Anyway, let's talk about this barbecue, which is my highlight of the episode. Before this, we got a lot of scenes talking about Shane's virginity and lack of interest in a girlfriend. There is a lot of insinuations made that he's gay, but I actually think he's a sociopath and is just too busy with baseball and his Dexter psycho killer origin story. However, when he first sees Jo, he is totally enthralled, and I guess they're a lot closer in age than her and Slade. They do have some chemistry, but I feel the heavy-handed production manipulation to make these two mirror Gabrielle Solis and John the Gardener from Desperate Housewives. But Slade just can't handle the fact that Jo is the star in the relationship and that everyone is drawn to her. You know what they say, even a broken clock is right twice a day, and even Shane has a great read on their relationship, and how Slade is making Jo sit with him on a separate table to try to control and isolate her due to his own insecurities. The next day, Shane goes to her house so that they can flirt some more and shoot the bunnies that are eating all her flowers, and Slade and his fragile ego is so frightened and jealous. He's pathetic. Oh, and something else that I wanted to mention on the barbecue is that at this stage in the show, I would definitely say that Gina is her backbone. She has this maternal warmth and is the glue bringing the cast together. I wish I had her hosting abilities and the way that she's able to hold things together while her husband is providing zero support to her. During this party, he's just inside watching TV, then decides to just leave the house. This is why, despite being married, I consider Gina to be a single mother. Alright, it's time to talk about Vicki and Don's relationship, and the cracks are really starting to show. She is feeling overwhelmed and is stressed that Don has been unemployed for the past 5 months. We all heard what happened to Mike Sr. when Vicki outgrew their relationship and couldn't stay with a man who couldn't bag the groceries she was scanning fast enough. There are already warning signs starting to go off about this relationship, and Vicki is at a turning point and she is done with this man and already completely checked out of this marriage. Now, there are some scenes in Real Housewives history that really stick in your mind for no good reason, and I'm not talking about the dinner party from hell or Scary Island, which are iconic moments, but there are some that are more mundane but just seared into my memory. One of these moments is the Gunvalsons' boat trip in Lake Havasu with the police getting involved. This scene pops into my head at least once a fortnight. Anyway, when I first watched the show, I was 20, so at the time I found myself being the most drawn to Joe and some of the other younger characters like Mike and Brianna. But 14 years later, I see myself the most in Dawn. I too would have lost my shit when I saw how Mike and his dumbass friends packed the boot of the car. Things were just thrown in any which way, and then they just placed a case of Corona and other heavy items on top of everything. It was a disgrace, so thank you, Dawn, for intervening. I once went to a supermarket with a friend who had no clue how to pack their bags, and they put a 2-litre bottle of Coke on top of some fruit and crisps. I'm getting mad just thinking about it. Once they're in Lake Havasu, it's time to relax, but instead, Vicki is running things like a drill sergeant, which I appreciated because she was making sure that the snacks situation was handled. And sidebar, but I wonder if Mike is still friends with these guys that he brought on this trip, because they all look traumatized by Vicki rubbing up against them to offload some of the sunscreen on her back. These poor boys. I need to jump ahead to when they're out in the water, enjoying some water sports and beers on the boat, only to have the boat police pull up right beside them for a safety check. As an anxious person, I really related to Dom panicking because he's had a few beers and couldn't find the fire extinguisher anywhere on the boat. On the other hand, Vicki is just giggling and trying to channel her inner Lori to try and flirt her way out of the situation. They manage to get away with just a warning, but Dawn is so pissed off with Vicki and lecturing her for laughing and not taking the situation seriously. Now Vicki feels like she's married to her dad, and she doesn't have daddy issues, so that isn't a good thing for her. Okay, let's finish this episode by talking about Lori, and overall this show isn't exactly lighthearted, but she is an anchor taking us even further down. I swear, they even use a more gloomy filter on the camera when they visit her townhouse. It's reminding me of the OC and how everything would look so bright and warm in Newport Beach. But then every time Ryan went to Chino, it was very grayscale and the camera was shaking. Anyway, we are introduced to a new character, Lori's man-friend / situationship Steve, who picks her up from the airport now that she's back from New Orleans. And you know that someone loves you when they pick you up from the airport because that's hell, so I'm sure he's a real stand-up guy, but if I had to describe Steve, I'd say that he looks like a washed-up band member from Smash Mouth. Best remembered for the song All Star that was iconically featured in Shrek. And as soon as she's back home, Lori is once again having issues with her kids. Ashley has been skipping work with Vicki because she's been too tired and is also somehow living in the 2000s comedy classic Dude, Where's My Car? Only to find out that her car has actually been repossessed because she's behind on her payments. Yeah, things aren't getting any easier for Lori, and she later finds out that Josh's stay in juvenile hall has been extended for at least a few more days. And that's all I've got in these first 4 episodes, but before we wrap things up, it's time to hand out some oranges in this week's Pop Monster Real Housewives Award ceremony. Our first award is for Housewife of the Week. Now, in terms of pure entertainment value, this award has to go to Vicki. She hasn't even had any of her truly iconic moments yet, but despite hating her guts, I genuinely can't take my eyes off her. Vicki Gunvalson was born to have a camera pointed at her. She just has that rare quality where even if she's doing something completely mundane, I'm completely captivated. Like Ramona Singer, I would generally watch this woman do absolutely anything. Now, on the other hand, my next award is for the keynote speaker at the Flop Summit. And this one was a little tricky because Lori is clearly having the hardest time in terms of her lifestyle, and some of her scenes are among the darkest we've had so far. But I think this award has to go to Kimberly. She's just been fairly forgettable for these first 4 episodes. Maybe that's because she's the most normal person in the cast, but compared to the chaos everyone else is bringing, she hasn't made much of an impression yet. Next up, we have the Red Flag Husband Award. And I dislike every single man on the show apart from Don Gunvalson, but this week's Red Flag Husband Award can only go to Slade. Between his constant attempts to control Joe, the way he speaks down to her, his desperate need for attention, and the way he keeps using his sons to try and improve his image, he really is scraping the bottom of the barrel. This man is absolutely deplorable and the worst of the worst. Alright, so next I want to hand out the Rich Person Problem of the Week Award, which has to go to Cara Keogh and her ongoing struggle with having to drive a 2-year-old secondhand Mercedes. Poor thing, then being bought a brand new BMW. Now, Kara's just a teenager, so I don't really blame her, but the show definitely presents her as a cautionary tale about what happens when your children have been spoiled just a little bit too much. Alright, now I have to award our Style Queen of the Week. And I couldn't possibly choose just one winner because, quite frankly, every single one of these women dresses horrendously. So this award is going collectively to everyone who wore one of those infamous sky tops that we are bombarded with throughout the season. Watching this actually set me on my own mission to try and buy one. I've searched Vinted, I've searched eBay, I've had absolutely no luck. It seems almost impossible to get hold of one here in the UK, so if anyone knows where I can find an authentic, early 2000s sky top, please let me know because I desperately want to own one. Final award I want to give out is for the most 2000s moment, and I couldn't choose because there was two moments that really stood out for me, so I'm going to give out a joint award. The first goes to Kimberly taking her daughter to the Afida counter to have her makeup done before her middle school dance. Now, this is definitely my own nostalgia talking because my mum worked on beauty counters when I was growing up. So many of my childhood memories are of sitting at those counters watching her give people makeovers. I don't even know if teenagers still do that before big events anymore. I'm guessing with YouTube tutorials and TikTok, they're probably all talented enough to do it themselves now. The second winner has to be Jo, casually smoking in the nightclub with her friends. Honestly, it almost brought a tear to my eye. We'll never see scenes like that again, but I suppose I should probably thank all the public health advocates who are responsible for my stupid clean lungs. And with that, all I have to say is thank you guys so much for listening. I'll be releasing these Real Housewives of Orange County rewatch episodes every other Wednesday. If you enjoyed this, I also have another podcast called Procedurally Challenged where I'll be watching my very first crime procedural and starting Criminal Minds from the very beginning. New episodes of Procedurally Challenged will be released on the Wednesdays when there isn't a new OC rewatch episode. So you'll still get a new podcast from me every week. If you liked what you heard here, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify or YouTube, and consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps new people find it. You can also find me on Instagram at PopMonsterPod. Again, thank you guys so much and have a wonderful rest of your day.